Good. Sorry. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I am good. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think
Um,
this is a topic that kind of we need to discuss, I think.
I think you are absolutely correct in that.
Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
So let me get this. I always have a secondary thing recording just in case.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And so I guess kind of before we get started, how do you just talking?
yeah, I figured tonight we'll just talk and kind of see
Okay.
how it goes and what we're going to talk about. If we think it sounds like something that we can edit down and post, then I will. If not, then we'll kind of get a game plan and sit down at another time and kind of have a. I've had both ways work. I've had some people who just talk and it flows well.
Close.
Yeah, and it's those are usually the most downloaded ones or the natural ones.
Sure.
But I've had some that have done scripted stuff too. So, we've
Yeah.
kind of talked and they're like, hey, we feel more comfortable doing it this way. And it's like, okay. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
I I think I'm generally fine with either. I feel like sometimes I say a lot, so
I
it's
do too.
kind of your preference.
I say, a lot.
Yeah, same. I feel like it's a
So,
Central Indiana thing.
yeah, so no worries. Um, and what I do is, when I go to edit the podcast, I will just have you send me a bio, whatever you want me to say at the
Sure.
very beginning, and I'll put that in there, and then I put it in the description of the podcast as well. So
Okay.
it's in both places. This recording that I do on Zoom, I usually just post those on my YouTube channel. Just so in case you ever want to go on it and look at it, or if somebody wants to actually see the conversation, I usually try to just post them on there.
Okay.
I don't do a lot of promoting for my YouTube channel, but they're on there if anybody wants to go on there and look at them. So,
Okay. Sounds
so
good.
yeah, but yeah, I, I feel like with the news and now we had that, what is it,
Hayden Panettiere. Yeah, she just
Yeah,
passed.
and her in her memoir, she writes about having postpartum depression. And
Yeah.
giving up
And
custody of her child because of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like it's, something that is pervasive. And in general, 1 in 5 moms and dads have postpartum depression or some sort of perinatal mental health, postpartum mental health disorder. Um, but yet it's not talked about,
yeah,
right? So many people are experiencing this and it lives just in the shadows and it shouldn't.
yeah. I think there's a lot of stigma behind it. I dealt with postpartum depression with my first
Mhm.
son,
Yep.
and uh, I really didn't know how to deal with it, and I had a lot of pushback with the way that I did end up dealing with it because it was kind of, I went back to work. I went back to work at 6 weeks
Yep.
because I just, I mentally just could not function at home. And I got a lot of grief for that, but that was the only way I could survive at that time, you know?
Yeah. And I think it becomes so hidden at times because we all deal with it differently. I too had postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, and everyone has an opinion, right? The comparison factor is so large, right? Well, I did it this way, or well, they did it this way, or my mom or my grandma or so and so, right? Everyone has a different way of dealing with it. And to a certain extent, well, I think to a large extent, you're right. The stigma behind it and the judgment that we all face of what's the right decision for ourselves and for our baby and right isn't universal, right? We all deal with it differently and different doesn't mean bad.
Yeah. And I think we hold a lot of guilt as mothers anyway.
For sure.
I didn't bond with my son, and that was a guilt for me. I couldn't breastfeed,
Mhm.
we bottle fed. The guilt of he didn't need me, you know what I mean? Because I wasn't giving
Yeah.
him anything. And I think you already like hammer yourself down with that
Mhm.
self-doubt anyway, and then you don't want everybody to know that you're not a natural mom.
Right. And what is natural mom, right? There's so many different types of moms.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's how you
I
feel. You're
do.
just like, you feel like you're going to be
Absolutely.
judged because you're just not the mom that you thought you'd be and that everybody
Mhm.
else thinks you should be.
Yeah. And I think one thing I talk a lot about with my clients in that regard is the like the underpinning of grief within our experience, right? We all have this idea of what motherhood is supposed to look like and what our version of motherhood is supposed to look like. And then when it turns out that we're not bonding with our child, or we feel too touched out and we can't take another hold of the baby, or we're so exhausted that we just need to sleep instead of nurse or pump or however, right? There's this grief that our own idea isn't coming to fruition, and then comes in the guilt, right? And the
Mhm.
shame that this isn't the way that it was supposed to go.
And you don't want to say anything because you don't want to be judged. I get that.
Right?
And I get that
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
Judged. And, you don't want people to know that as a parent, you feel like you failed, really. I mean, I did. I held
I
that for a
did.
long time.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, as themes of that come up throughout motherhood and parenthood in general, like this deep thought that we've failed in some way. And um as you're talking to, the thing that's coming to mind is the how prevalent social media is these days, and how easy it is for us to compare to the highlight reel. And
Mhm.
you kind of have both sides of the spectrum on social media, right? Motherhood is glorified and everything is butterflies and roses and nothing is bad. And then the other side, where it's just like, complaints and everything's terrible and the kids are running amok, and then all within that is the judgment, right? Well, if you didn't give them screens, or if you only breastfed, or if you only, all of these things, and, you know, then when you're sitting with the guilt and you're Googling at 2 a.m. and you're wondering, why am I so bad at this? Where do you turn?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more, like you said, social pressure. I think one of the bad things too is that you only hear the major stories. Like
Yeah.
this one that's right now
Hmm.
with the Clancy, and then you had the lady years ago in Texas.
Hmm.
Well, it was Yancey too, wasn't it? Close to that, it was like
I think so.
or something.
Yeah. Hmm.
And you have those major stories that hit the news, and then everybody thinks that postpartum depression leads to this extreme,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know.
Which I think only adds to the pressure, right?
Yeah.
How many women are out there right now listening to the Clancy trial, reading some of her journal entries and saying, that's me,
Mhm.
right? Am I going to do this? Is this what my story is going to look like? And no, right? Not necessarily. We hope that it doesn't ever get to that point. In general, postpartum psychosis and depression are very treatable, right? Postpartum
Mhm.
psychosis, of course, is an emergency, and that requires emergent treatment. But there are really good providers out there that can provide the support when caught at any point in time, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, again, the quietness of it all, right? We're sitting behind our computers or our phones and we're like, well, that's me, but what do I do? And if I say anything, the other part to it all, if I say anything, well, is DCS going to be called? Because I have these really intrusive thoughts about, you know, what if I drop my baby, or what if I fall down the stairs, or what if my baby just goes down the stairs, right? Um,
Mhm.
and that does, intrusive thoughts doesn't mean you're going to harm your baby, or doesn't mean, but it feels so real
Mhm.
that there's this, yeah, I think a very real thought too of like, well, what's going to happen to me or my baby? And I think that's part of the beauty of postpartum, is that we care so deeply and we care so much. Even if we're feeling so depressed, there's the care that it underpins everything, right? This innate care, regardless of if we're bonding or not. And, you know, the fear of it all, right? It is so complex.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many levels to it. I
Yeah.
mean, like you said, there's so many levels. And I think we missed the mark too, is, with like her, it was months later, it was 8 months when she
Hmm.
started having these thought, and it's like, yeah, and I tell my moms all the time when I'm doing lactation consults, I'm like, it could be your hormones are really like it takes 18
Hmm.
months, I say, it takes months to
Yeah.
get them regulated again and get everything kind of back on track. And I said, it can happen 15 months later. It can, I mean, it's not something that if you don't have it in that first few weeks, it's not, you're not going to have to deal with it. And that's one thing I think we miss too, that we don't really talk about. Because that was one of the big things with this case was they said, well, it wasn't postpartum depression because it was 8 months later. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything.
No, it doesn't. No, it really doesn't. And I usually tell my clients up to 2 years.
Yeah.
I think the more acute period of postpartum is up to a year, but then we still have all of these hormonal shifts. And realistically, if we're thinking about a typical, and I'm overgeneralizing here, a typical breastfeeding journey, like at a year, most women would then start to wean, and then the hormonal shift from there too. And it's wild. And there's like the 2 week period of baby blues.
Mm-hmm.
And then if symptoms happen beyond then we would, and again, there's the duration and everything like that. But in general, if it happens after that 2 week period, then that would be considered a PPD, PPA, PPP,
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis or something along those lines. And I think the other tricky thing with like postpartum depression, but also postpartum psychosis in this regard is like that can still hit within the year period of postpartum. And so just because it's normally happens in the first 2 to 3 weeks of postpartum doesn't mean it can't happen up until a year.
Mm-hmm. I guess my question would be being a lactation consultant. So when I go to homes to see the moms, they have an issue, right? They're
Hmm.
calling
Yep.
us because there's a breastfeeding issue, there's a pumping, something is going on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stressors
Hmm.
with that in general. And a lot of stress, and I always tell the moms a lot of stress, makes the milk supply go down and it, makes you not sleep as well and all these things. But I guess my thing is in the lactation courses that I went through in the classwork, we don't learn a lot about postpartum depression. We have a little bit, and we have some CE courses, but I guess, it's like, why can't we make the mental health part of it just part of the lactate, you know what I mean? Part of that whole package anyway.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
that's not my realm. I always make sure when I go in, because nobody in all the times I had with my son, nobody ever asked me if I was okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nobody did. And so I always make sure we talk about what's going on. And then I always ask them, I'm like, are you okay? How are you feeling? What's going on? And I'll have moms cry. You know what I mean? Because they're just like, nobody's ever asked me how I feel.
Right.
Everybody comes to see the baby.
Hmm.
Everybody, but nobody. So I try to make a point to that, but I feel like there's another step that we really need to take
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that.
I think that's a great thought in the question of like what do we do in these situations? I think in general, asking the mother, the birthing parent, how are you? What's going on? What's your experience like? I think the thing that a lot of people and sometimes providers even miss is sitting with them and hearing and listening, not to respond, right? I think it's easy when we get into the provider realm of, okay, well, there's a problem, so let's fix it and let's move on. Not necessarily move on from the client or the patient, but move forward to a solution really quickly. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of us are really looking for the validation that we're not alone, that this isn't a wild and crazy out of this world experience. A lot of people experience this and that there is help available, right? We don't have to sit in the shadows and sit quietly and secretly suffer. There's support out there.
Mhm.
Um, as a provider, having a list of trusted mental health resources to provide them, contact cards, even a kind of a provider on speed dial, if you will, that says, "Hey, I got this client, they need additional support. What's the best course of action here?" Um, I think that in light of the Lindsay Clancy trial and everything going on with like the judgment towards providers too, I think the other thing that as a society we have to bring to light too is like the failure of the medical system too, right? The system is designed very unfortunately, to not be collaborative, to be very quick, to not spend time with clients or patients. And in order for the providers to get paid, right, we all have to make a living and we all have to make money, but it also is at the expense of the patient. And so in a perfect world, we would overhaul the medical system, make collaborative care really easy and accessible, not have such strict insurance regulations on how to access care, who can get care, how can they get into care. Um, anyway, I digress a little bit. Um, the system is a challenge in general, but back to your original question, I think really sitting and listening and saying, that's a really terrible experience, or this seems really tough. How can I support you? What would be really helpful for you right now? I think in light of the work that you do, right? What would make feeds easier? How can we access your partner or your community or your family? And if you don't have a partner, community, family, how can we tap you into a mom's group or your local postpartum group or something
Mhm.
along those lines?
Yeah. Yeah. Those postpartum groups are getting a little harder to find. I mean, they're not as
Mm,
prevalent as they used to be. But I have found a few of those. And yeah, with all this stuff coming on, it's made me think. I travel to different counties and I'm like, I
yeah.
really need to have a list of providers in those areas, everything, just besides their primary care, but also mental health providers in the area, contact them and say, hey, do you guys work with can I put you on my list to give to people
Yeah.
and do that? And because it's just not something I've ever really, I've talked to, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience
Mhm.
that way. I have experience, but I don't have, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I'm remembering now one of your comments earlier about like CEs and things like that, and why isn't this education more prevalent? And I think in part due to the stigma, right? But also I think for providers like you, where you're traveling around to different areas, that's really hard to keep track of, right? You really have to keep on top of, okay, who's still in practice and who's accepting new clients and and that in and of itself creates an additional, I'm going to say this word and I don't mean it as harshly as it's going to come out, but like an administrative burden on
Mhm.
you that again tied to money to a certain extent you're not necessarily getting paid for. You're doing it out of the kindness of your own heart to provide for your clients, but all of that is really intertwined when we're looking at like the system and the model and
Yeah.
everything like that.
Yeah, because you talked about earlier with insurance, and insurance is hitting lactation hard, and they're
I've
not
heard.
covering. Yeah, they're not covering
Mhm.
it now. They're not, and so women just aren't accessing it, like they were before. I have a pretty low cash rate because I want to help. I
Mhm.
want to get out there and help, so my cash rate is pretty low. But it's terrible. It's like, we pay all this money into the insurance world and it's like, why can't you, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
this is
no,
a
that's
need.
it is, right? And then you look at adding up like premiums and I think there's a growing trend in employers offering high deductible plans, but that comes with its own burden because, then you're looking at a ten to $15,000 deductible
Mhm.
and paying up until then. And gosh, who can do that, right?
Yeah,
That's absolutely insane. And so then in a sense, you're living like paycheck to paycheck with your HSA funds and if you're even contributing and,
yeah.
all of those things. But
And it limits how you reach out for services when you need them too. You know what I mean? Yeah, it limits that.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Especially
what
because you're
I,
not working. You know what I mean? Especially when moms stay at home, they're not working at that time. And yeah,
yeah.
so
And I always tell clients or people potentially seeking care, prospective clients, like when you're talking to any provider, I think specifically mental health providers, always ask if there's a sliding scale option, always ask if there's any sort of pro bono service. And if there's not with that specific provider, ask what are the providers in the area that are offering sliding scale or, and or hey, I can pay X for this service. Is that something you're able to work with, right? I think when we enter the private
Yeah.
practice side of things, there's a bit more leeway in how we're able to show up for our clients, um, and kind of what we're able to work with and negotiate in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see
Yeah.
that. Are you finding that more moms are seeking out treatment? You
Oh,
feel like people are coming or families are coming?
say you cut out for just a second. Say
Oh,
that again.
do you feel like there are people that are reaching out, more reaching out to you for those kind of services now, at least?
Yeah, I have specialized training in perinatal and postpartum, and I work with individuals, men, women, and couples. And I would say the majority of my caseload right now are people that either are in the perinatal or postpartum period, or specifically men and couples right now that are like in the fatherhood journey and then struggling within their relationship within the parenthood journey.
Mhm.
And and that brings another set of complex issues too, right? Where you have the non-birthing partner, the and they're wondering, like they're feeling helpless and they're wondering how to support. And, it kind of throws a wrench in the communication style. And, you hope that people have healthy communication styles, but sometimes they don't based on their own experience or their own trauma. And then how do you navigate that with a new baby, right?
Yeah,
Who's crying all the time and always hungry. And, if there are lactation concerns, what do we do? And how does the partner help and all of that stuff. But yeah, I do feel like, at least for me as a provider, I get a good number of men and women in the postpartum period that are seeking support. Um, and I love that.
that's good. Yeah. I
Mhm.
do
I
a
mean, I
lot.
don't love that they're experiencing
Yeah,
challenges,
well,
don't get me
exactly.
wrong.
That
I
you're
love
coming,
they're
that you're
seeking
coming
support.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of my lactation consults in the evening because then the dads are the parent, the both parents
hmm
are home, and that's kind of
hmm
nice because then we can kind of discuss a lot of things and walk through some things, and so I do a
Yeah.
lot of mine in the evening just for that reason. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I
probably
and
just,
it's
yeah, easier access too, right?
yeah. Yeah. Well, I
hmm
think when they both hear it, then, it's a little bit, you know what I mean? Because the mom can talk about the struggles during the day, and the dad kind of
hmm
really, the parent, whoever it is, not necessarily just a dad, but the parent can hear
hmm
what that is during the have a little more, maybe, I don't want to say empathy sounds bad, but you know what I mean? Like understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, there's a particular disconnect, I think, in those situations too, because specifically breastfeeding can be so demanding physically, emotionally, I mean, time-wise, right? Like if you're in the triple feeding journey, that takes up your whole entire day, right?
Yeah.
And so then, yeah, partners at work and they only hear it, and or maybe they have this expectation, well, she's excuse me, she's home, like the dishes and the normal household stuff should be done. And so then there's this, growing resentment and this series of unrealistic expectations that's really difficult. And you being able to provide the service in the evening time and um have both of them hear the same message, then nothing's getting crossed in the wires as far as like, well, Tina said, like,
Yeah.
and they're like, well, did she really,
Yeah. It's
and
like, yeah.
yeah,
Really? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, I'm considering, I've been kind of tossing it around. I guess I'll ask you since you're on here. I was thinking about having, since I do go to different counties, but support group, where women can come, well, families can come, it doesn't have to be women, come and get, lactation questions. This stuff's been going on the last week or so. I'm kind of like, maybe I should have a mental health professional in the areas I'm in and see if they would want to do that as well. And,
Yeah,
maybe if we start having more open conversations that this is just something that happens
yeah,
and so
yeah.
yeah.
No, I love the idea of a really like small, intimate, let's get specialized lactation care while also talking about like the challenges, right?
Yeah.
Do it all together. I think that's a wonderful idea. If there's space and,
Yeah.
why not put something together and just see what happens, right?
And see what
And it
happens.
might
Yeah.
not, the first
Yeah.
handful might not take off, but this mom tells that mom and that mom tells that mom, and then soon enough we're like
Yeah.
everyone says I need support, which is ideally the goal,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
provide and create a community of sorts, whether they continue to be supportive to one another outside of the group, but at least within the group for the hour long, they know that they can come and get some sort of relief and, you know,
And
connection.
talk. Yeah. And talk. And I'd like it to become just normal conversation that it's just, we talk about it like a normal thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I grew up, my mom is bipolar. So I grew up in
Mm-hmm.
a household with mom who had a mental health issue. She left us when we were kids, and I didn't understand it then, but I did as I grew up. I understood
Sure.
where that came from. But it was so stigmatized. She never talked about it. She never wanted anybody. She moved away so nobody would know who she grew
Hmm.
up with, that she went through this issue, and lived away from us forever. And
Wow.
it's kind of like, why, it's
Mhm.
like, why is it like that? But now she talks about it. She tells people all the time. And she goes, this is my
Incredible.
life. This is what, and I feel like that's a normal conversation for me. You know,
Hmm.
I have, I mean, it's like that's how I grew up. That was my childhood, and as my adulthood too, actually. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like, why can't this just be normal?
Right. Why can't we talk about it? And think about the trajectory in a sense, and forgive me if this brings anything up, certainly not meant to trigger anything, but like the trajectory, if had she had support, right? Or had it been less stigmatized, maybe that would have looked different for both her motherhood journey and then your experience as a child, right?
Hmm.
And not only did that shape those situations respectively, but then also probably shaped your own view of motherhood, when you gave birth and what that looked like. And I can only imagine maybe some fear, right? Like
Oh yeah.
what's
I
what's
struggled
the
with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I struggled with it, and then having postpartum depression and not bonding with my son was
Yeah.
that trigger of, I'm just like her, I mean,
Mhm.
you know, and it took me a long time to get past it, but I understand it. I understand why she did it. I mean, as I got older, I was like, okay, I understand it,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but
It's always it's both a very challenging experience, but I also think sometimes powerful to be able to kind of come to the realization that it was our parents' first day on earth too, right? It was they were doing things for the first time just as we're doing things for the first time as mothers, and just in life in general, right? Like it's our first day being human today. And so yeah, there's a lot of duality there, right? This understanding and this empathy, but also like I wish things were different.
yeah. And I don't think, and even then, I mean, they didn't talk about, I've talked to my mom now. I have three siblings, and I talked to her about postpartum depression, because she had, like I said, she wasn't diagnosed with bipolar disorder until she was in her 30s. So she'd already had us.
Hmm.
And so she said, yeah, two of my four pregnancies, I dealt with postpartum depression, but nobody talked about it. You just went on with because she was a stay-at-home mom, and
Yeah.
so you just dealt with it, and you just, you kept it in your house, and nobody knew about it outside of the house. So it's always been an issue. Of course, we knew that, but
Hmm.
we've always dealt with it the same way.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like,
Yeah. Because what are people gonna say? You
yeah,
know? It's this fear that everyone has something to say about something. And that's true to a certain extent. And, you know, our journey is ours alone,
yeah,
right? Again, not better or worse than anyone else's. And um, it can be a really incredibly uplifting and powerful experience to be able to say, like, ooh, something's wrong and I need additional support. And oftentimes, what I see in those situations is kind of this huge release of emotion that I don't have to live in this shameful or shame-filled, thought process. Like there is help and there is support, and again, I I don't have to live it alone, but also I'm not so different from the next person in a sense.
Yeah. And I think that goes with, like you said, with talking. I think people realize, when I talked about my postpartum depression, when I talked about even my mom's mental health, then I hear people go, oh, yeah, I have that, or I've done, I mean, you start to realize, like you said, you're not the only person that's ever dealt with this, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that's true for so many things in motherhood. And I'll share this experience because I think it is relatable and hits on this topic. So I have, I always say I have two living children, and I gave birth to a sleeping baby. And so when I was going through my stillbirth experience, it was kind of, I mean, incredibly heartbreaking, but also heartwarming to know so many other people have also experienced stillbirth or, a miscarriage in some way, shape, or form. And that's another topic that isn't necessarily talked about.
Before she
Oh, Tina, I'm losing you.
finally was there.
Tina,
Are you there?
yeah, you're frozen though.
On mine. There you go. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, I don't know what you caught from that.
Okay. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here now.
It's like,
You're going in and out.
I know.
Oh, I
I
think
don't
you
know
might be
why.
back now.
It's like, I don't know.
Better.
Mine shows full, so I don't know why it keeps going in and out.
Mine does too. I don't know. Technology,
Yeah,
right?
I know. I know. Well, I really appreciate you coming on here though and talking to me and
Yeah.
stuff. And I
Yeah.
think it's definitely conversations that we need to have.
Absolutely.
Um,
Agreed.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
I am so I always like to plug Postpartum Support International. They have a slew of online support groups that are free. There's a number of different offerings, and they do, in general, offer a wide variety of time frames. So I volunteer and like host one of the early infant and stillbirth loss awareness groups or parenting groups. And I know that group, I mean, I run mine the fourth Friday from 1 to 2:30, but that one in general there's a 9 p.m. group, there's a Tuesday group, um, one of their newest groups is a dads in law support group. So they're trying to push that out for dads to connect with a support group if they've experienced loss as well. But they have um, postpartum groups for Black moms, people of color. They have Spanish speaking support groups, parenting challenges support groups, postpartum depression, every
Hmm.
anxiety, OCD. It's a wonderful resource. So I
Okay.
always like to plug that. Postpartum Support International also has a perinatal and postpartum, whether you have advanced training in perinatal and postpartum mental health disorders, or you are a PMHC, which is a perinatal mental health certificate through PSI, they have a whole directory of providers that have specialized training as
Oh,
well.
nice. Okay.
So super great resource. And then I'm sure you're aware too, like most hospitals will have some sort of support group.
Yeah.
Um, and then Yeah, I'm working on developing a support group for dads right now, in fatherhood to provide some connection and um, help with just, I mean, a lot of different things that, non-birthing partners and dads experience. But, and then the goal is to provide a postpartum for women support group as well. So,
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's great. My dad raised my brothers and I, so it was in the
yeah,
80s. It was unheard of, but
yeah.
he did amazing. So
Yeah, but dads struggle too, right? It's not necessarily exclusive to women. Again, different experience is not bad, but they deserve support too.
absolutely. So I'll support that one 100% because my dad's a rock star when it came to that because
Yeah, I
he
love
stepped
that.
up. Yeah, he stepped up and did an amazing job. So
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
yep.
Well,
So
certainly let me know how I can best support you. I would love
yeah,
to be a resource if you need anything. Feel free to give my name to any of your clients.
yeah.
And um,
Where are you located?
yeah, so I'm able to provide virtual therapy through the
Okay,
state of
good.
Indiana, and my office is located in Danville.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, a
I'm
lot
also licensed in Arkansas. That's kind
of
of a
yes, I
weird
saw
too,
that.
but yeah.
I saw that. So virtual. Okay. Yeah, I will definitely put you on the list. Like I said, I'm going to try to get together a little list for my clients just so I have it in case they need it or, I may just make a little packet for them anyway because there's always certain things that they always ask, and if I just put that together in a little packet, I'll just stick it in there. And I just, I hope one day this is a topic that we just talk about and it's not,
Always, yeah.
you know, I
Hmm.
think I think there's more awareness. I do worry sometimes that people are on a lot of medications and to try to fix things, which medications are needed, don't get me wrong, but I
Hmm.
really think
Oh, I lost
that
you.
we need to be able to talk and kind of, no, are you there?
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Hmm. No, I agree with you on the topic of medication. Definitely a time and a place, and fully support that as a tool. And my hope is that that connection piece by talking and sharing and um, just generally being able to say like I'm there too, right? Um,
Mhm.
will be far greater in the near future.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah.
Positive thoughts. Well, thank you so much
Right.
for coming on here and talking to me today. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
appreciate it. Absolutely. And I'll
Absolutely.
probably touch base with you again in the future. If you ever have anything you want to talk about,
Yeah.
yeah, just let me know and I'll get you back on here again. So
Okay. Sounds
yeah,
great. Thanks,
I'll
Tina. I
edit.
appreciate you.
Yeah, I'll edit this and I'll send it to you. Just give me
Okay.
your bio and then let me know if you think it's okay. Then we'll just get it on there and
Okay.
I think it sounded pretty good. I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff. We cut in and out. I may have to edit it and see
Yeah,
how
we'll edit some of that out.
some of that out because it kind of kept cutting in and out.
Hmm.
But yeah, I appreciate it.
Wonderful. No
Thanks.
problem. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks.
Appreciate
Have
you.
have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.